Welcome to Blessed Be the Breakdown, the podcast where I unpack the Handmaid's Tale and uncover the real-world parallels that make it all the more terrifying. Today, we're diving into Season 6, Episode 10, the series finale. As always, this breakdown is full of spoilers, so if you haven't watched yet, I recommend doing so and then coming right back. Alright, let's get into it. Episode 10, The Handmaid's Tale. We start the series finale with a June voiceover, telling us that Boston is now free from Gilead. The Americans have fully taken over again. We see this big bonfire where they're burning Gilead flags and relics, while she talks about the plan to push further, taking back places like New York, Ohio. She also mentions maybe even taking back Colorado someday. And then Hannah. We get these soft, happy flashbacks of June and Hannah at a carnival running through a field. Hannah has been mentioned here or there all season, but not really anything too deep. We haven't seen her at all. It feels like in this episode, they will be giving us more Hannah mentions just to lay the groundwork for the Testaments. Rita and Moira join June at the fire as they raise the new American flag, now with only 3 stars: Boston, Alaska, and Hawaii. It is also here that we get our first mention of Janine since the gallows. June asks Moira if she's heard anything, and Moira says no. And that's about the end of that. They share this small side hug before Rita and Moira walk off, leaving June alone by the fire. Then comes the Nick flashbacks. June kissing him on the bridge, when she was pregnant, when she brought Nicole to see him in no man's land, and finally her last glimpse of him walking onto the plane. As she walks away from the fire, we also get a flashback of Lawrence boarding the plane. As June says, God always requires a sacrifice. I don't think I will ever fully recover from episode 9. It was just one of the most heartbreaking and hard-hitting episodes I think we have seen in a while. June eventually makes her way to Luke, who's still working on things, including getting the power back on so flights from Alaska can start coming in, which means Holly and June's mom will finally be able to join them. They start talking about May Day and their next moves, planning which cities to take back next. June brings up Hannah again and mentions Colorado, and Luke reassures her the way they get Hannah back is by taking down Gilead one city at a time. Next we see June meet with Tuello. He tells her that with Gilead losing a bunch of commanders, there are a lot of promotions happening. Commander Mackenzie is being moved up, and that means his whole family, Hannah included, is relocating to DC. That puts her 2,000 miles closer. June also asks about Janine, and we find out that the Eyes have her. But we also find out that the Eyes had and released Aunt Lydia, and now she's helping Tuello track Janine down. And here's where I start seeing some holes. Like, how and why did the Eyes just let Aunt Lydia go? I really wished we had gotten more background there, because it's kind of a big deal, and they kind of just skim right past it. We finally also get a little background for Tuello. During the scene, we find out that he has a son and an ex-wife who are currently living in Hawaii. And it turns out that one of his driving motivations for fighting and continuing to fight is he wants to bring down Gilead so his son won't have to deal with the fallout later. Which totally makes sense. At the end of the day, they all want to make this world safer for their kids. Who wouldn't? Then we move into this really quiet, emotional moment where June visits a memorial wall. She finds a bunny and a note left by a parent, clearly grieving a missing child. That triggers another memory, this time of June and Hannah at a carnival. But unlike the earlier flashbacks, this one's tense. June loses Hannah for a moment when she runs off from her. When she finally finds her, Hannah says, "You lost me," and June responds, "Mommy's always come back." And of course, this version of Hannah is played by a new, younger actress, since the original Hannah is now way older. But this new one kind of resembles Chase Infinity, and I'm not sure if I said that name right. But she's the person who is supposed to be playing Hannah in the Testaments. Still, it's a little jarring that we went from barely hearing Hannah's name all season to her showing up or being mentioned in nearly every scene of the finale. Now, once again, I get why they're doing it to set up the Testaments, but I really wish, just like the Nick story, that they had paced this out better, instead of cramming it all into episode 10. Right after this, we get a big moment when June is visiting Serena. Serena congratulates her on her victory, and June says, "None of this would have happened without you." Serena then calls herself the Destroyer of Worlds, And I mean, she's not wrong. She even mentioned that she has helped bring Boston down twice now. Serena brings up Nick and tells June she's sorry for her loss. And June goes cold. She says Nick reaped what he sowed, and he led a violent and dishonest life. And honestly, I was taken aback, because that's a sharp turn for someone who loved him so deeply, and after he helped her escape multiple times. I don't know what June's astrological sign is, but that whole moment screamed Gemini energy to me. I do have an actual theory as to why June is being so cold, which I'll mention here in a second. Serena tries to play devil's advocate and says if Nick ever thought he had a real choice, he would have chosen you. And this is the one thing I'm kind of calling BS on. Nick did have choices. He could have walked away multiple times, but still he didn't. Hearing this from Serena, however, seems to have cracked something open in June just a little, like it gave her permission to feel what she's been pushing down. I think June has been afraid to grieve Nick, because the way he went out didn't match the version of him she's been carrying with her all these years. The Nick who risked everything to help her escape, the Nick who loved her quietly but fiercely, the Nick who was one of the few people who saw her, even in Gilead. That's the man she held on to. But the version of Nick we saw at the end, making deals, staying in Gilead, choosing to live within that system, he complicates the narrative. And mourning that Nick feels like a betrayal of everything she's fought for, of the people she's lost, of the sacrifices she's made to survive. It's almost like if she lets herself feel sadness for him, she's softening towards that same system that tried to destroy her. But grief isn't always clean or logical, and I think deep down, June knows that. She knows that love and disappointment can exist side by side, that people are allowed to both be your lifeline and your letdown. And maybe, just maybe, Serena's comment gave her the nudge she needed to start letting herself feel both things at once. After they're done talking about Nick, we see June helping Serena pick out clothes for Noah. And then Serena has this really raw moment. She tells June she can never go back. Too many people want her dead. She says Canada and EU won't give her a passport. And now she's essentially nobody. June responds with, "You're his mother. Just be that." It's simple, but it lands. Because for all of the horrible things Serena has done, at the end of the day, Noah is innocent in all of this. And Serena is all he has. Right after that, Tuello shows up to get Serena on a bus to a UN refugee camp. She's clearly nervous, unsure of what's waiting for her, but Tuello tells her not to worry, and promises he'll find her. And yeah, they were definitely having a moment. There's something between them for sure, and I think they gave us that because they knew everybody online was kind of like saying that they had something. So I guess they finally got their moment. Now look, I know Serena is a horrible person, and I get that a lot of people wanted her to have a terrible, dramatic downfall, but honestly, I think this was more of a realistic ending. Because in war and in real life, the bad guys don't always get what they deserve. Sometimes they just fade out, find a new identity, or escape accountability altogether. And that's kind of what is happening here. Then we finally get this moment of closure between Serena and June. Serena apologizes again for everything she's done, and this time, June forgives her. Now, I don't think Serena deserves forgiveness. She was at the front lines of so much pain and suffering for so many women, but I think June, despite everything, really does have a soft spot for Serena, and she says this just to give Serena closure, because to June, whether she forgives her or not doesn't matter to her. So I definitely think she did this to help Serena move on more than herself. After Serena gets on the bus, Tuello hands June a badge to get her through a checkpoint, basically for her to return to her old stomping grounds, aka the house where she once lived with the Waterfords. As he leaves, she calls him Captain Tuello, and he corrects her. It's actually Commander Tuello. Now, I saw people online talking about this, thinking it meant he was a Gilead commander, but just to clear it up, Commander is also a legit rank in the actual armed forces. As June walks through the city, she ends up in front of the ice cream shop from season 1. And then we hear a familiar voice. Emily, Alexis Bledel, is back for the finale. And I was so happy to see her. We finally got some closure for her character, and honestly, it felt long overdue. Turns out, she's been living as a Martha in Bridgeport with a commander who's a friend, and she's managed to stay in touch with her son and wife this whole time. Once again, we hear her say that they're the reason she's still fighting. That part of her story never changed. She's just as strong-willed as June and has always been a fighter. As they continue to walk and talk, June explains how she is angry. She brings up Hannah and how all she wants is for things to go back to the way they're supposed to be. But she admits that some things just feel impossible. That's when Emily says we are both alive to see this together. I'm thinking of adjusting my concept of the impossible. And that line couldn't be truer. The fact that they're both alive in this moment after everything, that is its own type of miracle. Continuing the wave of nostalgia, we get a dream sequence of what Boston could have looked like if Gilead had never happened. And as Landslide by Stevie Nicks plays, we see June, Rita, Moira, Janine, Alma, Brianna, and Emily all singing karaoke together. I'm so glad they brought back some of the original characters for this. It was beautiful, but also sad, knowing that Alma and Brianna are gone. It's like a version of the life they all deserved but never got. When we shift back to reality, June is at the Boston Globe. She grabs her old red cloak, walks outside, and throws it in the fire. And just as she does, the power comes back on. I have to believe that was symbolic, like her burning that cloak, the symbol of her oppression coinciding with the lights coming back on, that felt intentional. Like a moment of rebirth or hope is finally turning a corner. June, who is now asleep, is suddenly woken up by someone telling her she needs to come with them. It's urgent. She ends up in the woods, right along the new border with Gilead, where she meets up with Tuello. As they talk and walk, 2 trucks pull up, with 2 guards hopping out of one of the trucks. And before you know it, they're dragging and dropping Janine on the ground. June immediately runs to her, comforting her, and praise be, Janine is finally safe. But she's not alone. We see Aunt Lydia and Naomi arrive too, with Charlotte. And listen, I'm actually glad Naomi is finally doing something decent by giving Charlotte back to Janine. My heart was so full in that moment. Janine finally getting a happy ending, reuniting with her daughter. It was emotional in all of the best ways. But one thing I'm curious about, why does she decide to give her back? Like, I would like to have a little more backstory on that. And that being said, I still can't help but wonder, why are these Gilead guards just so cool with this? Like, we needed a little more explanation here. The whole Lydia situation especially. How was she just let go by the eyes? Why is she suddenly in a position to broker these deals? That part felt rushed and a bit murky. But that aside, I am glad Janine is one of the people getting a happy ending. She just deserves it so much. That poor girl has been through so much trauma with freaking Belle and then her eye. I'm just glad she is being reunited with her daughter and finally safe. Before they leave, June tells Naomi thank you, and Aunt Lydia turns to her and says, "Take good care of our Janine, please, and Charlotte." And this is the first time she is called Charlotte instead of Angela. That's just huge. That's a shift. I mean, as if her bringing her wasn't a shift already, but it's just a big thing. And between that and what we heard earlier from Tuello, it's clear Lydia is now working with Mayday. So she's officially being set up for the Testament storyline. And just another little side note, I love how she says, take good care of our Janine. Like, she knows that her and June both care so much for her. And it was just such a heartwarming thing to hear and see. Before they part ways, June thanks Lydia and drops another Bible verse. And okay, I just have to say it, it's like weird to me how many Bible verses June has been quoting this season. Like, where is this coming from? Maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't remember her using this many Bible quotes. And there's nothing wrong with it, but I just feel like it feels kind of out of nowhere for her character. She's always been more rebellious and sarcastic when it comes to scripture, so for her to suddenly be tossing out verses like a preacher, it just doesn't totally track for me. Maybe I missed something, but I'm almost 100% sure she was never quoting scripture like this before. Next, we get another emotional reunion. Holly and June's mom finally arrive in Boston. And immediately after that, we see June having this quiet, heartbreaking conversation with baby Holly. She's essentially telling her that she's going to have to leave her again, because there are still girls in Gilead who need saving, because Hannah still needs saving. It's a really emotional scene. You can tell how deeply June is struggling with the weight of it all. It's like she's sacrificing motherhood for the greater fight. And it's just brutal. It's just very sad. And you know she's just having a hard time with that. The last and final moment we get with Janine is when June asks her to watch Holly so she can go talk to her mom. Just that small little moment, and that is it for Janine for the rest of the series. Then we get this scene in front of the memorial wall. June's asking her mom if she would mind keeping Holly a little longer. Her mom asks, how much is a little longer? And June says, I don't know. And then her mom just breaks down saying, who will keep you safe? And that line, this scene just wrecked me. These last 2 episodes have honestly just been a non-stop just cry fest for me. I've never cried this much, I don't think, during this show. June starts explaining why she can't stop, why she has to keep fighting. She says Gilead will never stop coming for them, that not fighting back is what got them into Gilead in the first place. She needs to do this for her daughters to have a better future. And this was a huge theme. In this episode, we saw Emily talking about how she's fighting for her son. We saw Tuello talk about how he's fighting for his son, and now June. So it's just like a big prevalent theme in the show, really, but also big in this particular episode. June goes on to say that Gilead doesn't need to be beaten, it needs to be broken. Her mom says, "Can't someone else break them?" But June reminds her, "You taught me how to fight. You gave me this strength, this fire." It's just such a full circle mother and daughter moment. And it's like, I'm doing, what you taught me to do, what I saw you do, follow in your footsteps type of thing. June then expresses to her mom that sometimes she doesn't know if she's doing a great job as a mother. But her mom reassures her, letting her know that she tells Holly all of the time about how her mom saved women, how she escaped, and how she survived. That Holly should know her mom is a warrior. And then she tells June, you should write a book. June brushes it off at first, saying it's not a good story, that it's filled with violence, fear, and loss, but her mom says no. This is exactly the kind of story that needs to be told. A story about never giving up, for the people who may never find their babies, for the ones who keep trying anyway. June's mom tells her, write it for your daughters. Tell them who their mother was. Before the episode ends, we get one final moment between Luke and June, and it's actually really honest. June apologizes for underestimating him, and Luke points out that they're just so different now, that they don't know each other like they used to. And June agrees. We find out they're going their separate ways. June heading off to try and reach Hannah, and Luke will be going off to help Mayday take back more cities. So in a way, they're both still trying to get Hannah, just on different paths. Even though they may not be together, they will always be Hannah's parents, and that's something they will always have in common. They end their conversation by basically saying they'll see each other at the finish line. Before he leaves, Luke tells her she should write her story down. He reminds her that it wasn't all bad, that there were people who helped her, people who loved her. Janine, Emily, Lawrence, Nick. He says they're all worth remembering. I thought this was really big of Luke to say, and just very comforting towards June. And this is also just very true what he says, like, her story was horrible. She's been through horrible things, but she's become this warrior, this hero, this person who stood up for what was right and is rallying other people to stand up too. She is that person, and she deserves to have her story told. We shift over to Serena at the refugee camp, and wow, it's bleak. All she has is a chair, a table, and a bed, which in a way is kind of a play on a chair, a table, and a lamp from June in season 1, episode 1. Apparently, this camp doesn't even accept kids, so they weren't prepared for Noah at all. But June, being June, snuck her some baby supplies. It's a small gesture, but a meaningful one. And the last shot we get of Serena is of her holding Noah, telling him, "You are my most precious gift from God. Do you know how much I prayed for you? And now you're here, and you're perfect, and you're all I need." Her story closes with this moment of peace, realizing that she has what she's always wanted, a child. And I know a lot of people wanted a harsher ending for her, but I guess this is how her arc ends. In a weird way, it's kind of realistic, as I said earlier, because in life, people like Serena don't always get what they deserve. Sometimes they just keep going, and maybe that's its own kind of haunting. Now she has nothing but her baby, no home, or anything else in the world. The episode closes with June returning to the Waterford household, which somehow is still standing even after the fire. She's wearing a green jacket, which immediately caught my eye, because it feels like a clear nod to the Testaments. Inside the house, we finally get a vision of Hannah, in the present day, or at least in June's imagination. They reach out for each other's hands in this quiet, emotional moment. It's not a reunion, but it's something. It's a connection. Everything she is doing is for her daughters. And then we end exactly where we began, with June sitting on the ledge in that same room, just like she did in season 1, episode 1. Except now, she's recording her thoughts. A chair, a table, a lamp. That callback ties everything together. Not just the show, but also the original Handmaid's Tale book. It brings the story full circle. In the book, a professor discusses Offred's story, which was discovered on a series of cassette tapes left in an old army footlocker. Her recordings were eventually compiled and published as a manuscript titled The Handmaid's Tale. It's a quiet ending, but a powerful one. Not a dramatic rescue or a final battle, but a moment of reflection, of legacy. A reminder of everything June has endured, and how far this world still has to go. In the end, it's clear. This was always June's story. This was always The Handmaid's Tale. As a longtime fan who's also read the book, I really appreciated the ending. No, it wasn't perfect, but bringing things full circle to the novel just made it so meaningful. This whole series has been a retelling of June's story, and that becomes especially clear in the final moment. If you go back to episode 1, you can literally hear the flicker of the tape recording starting. She's been on the front lines of this fight from the very beginning, and that focus never wavered. The finale wasn't about tying everything up in a neat bow. It was about honoring the weight of June's journey, the cost of survival, and the legacy she leaves behind. Now let's get into some real-world parallels. So let's talk about power, privilege, and how justice tends to bend for those who can afford to pull the right strings. In The Handmaid's Tale, Gilead is a place where laws are enforced brutally, unless, of course, you're at the top of the food chain. Then suddenly, rules are negotiable. Sound familiar? Recently, Donald Trump pardoned Todd and Julie Chrisley, the reality TV stars convicted of bank fraud and tax evasion. And what's wild is that this wasn't just out of nowhere. Their daughter Savannah Chrisley had been openly lobbying for their release. It's also worth noting that Savannah Chrisley spoke at the Republican National Convention. It's just hard to believe that this is just a coincidence. But it gets deeper. One of the more glaring examples is the case of Paul Walzak. He was a former nursing home executive who literally pleaded guilty to tax crimes. Guilty in writing, and yet, while his pardon was still pending, his mom got an invite to Mar-a-Lago. Not just any invite, but a $1 million a plate fundraiser that included a promise of a personal meeting with Trump. And then less than 3 weeks later, her son gets pardoned. It's a straight line. Money, access, and influence seems to equal forgiveness and freedom. In The Handmaid's Tale, commanders break their own laws with no consequences because they are the system. Meanwhile, ordinary people, especially women, are punished severely for the tiniest infractions. When justice becomes transactional, when it depends on your proximity to power or your ability to pay to play, that's when we start seeing Gilead not as fiction, but as foreshadowing. In The Handmaid's Tale, Gilead exerts control over its citizens through surveillance and restriction of freedoms, particularly those who dissent or don't conform to its ideology. Recently, the US government has implemented policies that echo these themes. According to a BBC News article, the US administration has ordered embassies worldwide to halt new student visa appointments and plans to expand social media vetting for applicants. This move is a part of a broader crackdown on elite universities, which are accused of harboring left-wing ideologies and failing to address anti-Semitism amid pro-Palestinian protests on campuses. The administration has also frozen significant federal funding for institutions like Harvard and revoked their ability to enroll international students or host foreign researchers. These actions mirror Gilead's tactics of using administrative measures to suppress dissent and control access to education. By targeting international students and imposing strict surveillance, the government is effectively limiting the diversity of thought and expression within academic institutions. This raises concerns about the erosion of academic freedom and the potential for state overreach in regulating education. In both Gilead and these real-world scenarios, we see how power structures can manipulate systems to enforce conformity and silence opposition. It's a reminder of the importance of vigilance in protecting the freedoms that underpin our educational institutions. Now that the series is officially over, I'll still be putting out content, though I will most likely take a week off. Once The Testaments drops, I'll be covering that show as well, so stay tuned for that, but who knows when that's going to drop. In the meantime, if there's anything specific you'd like to hear or see, drop me a comment on social media. I'd love to know what you would like to hear more of: character deep dives, breakdown of Gilead's rules and structure, and I'll of course continue the real-world parallels, which will probably be the brunt of what I cover in the meantime. I'd love to hear your thoughts though, so come chat with me on YouTube, Instagram, or TikTok. Thanks for hanging out with me for this breakdown. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave a rating. It really helps more people find the podcast. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay sharp, and as always, blessed be the fight.